Good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 973 is on the air September 9th, 2024. And I'm waiting to be sure we're actually on the air because sometimes it takes a second, and sometimes I sit here and talk to myself, which is not necessarily a good thing, but maybe it is. So the minute I see my little red light, I know for sure that we're live. But hopefully we are live, and we're waiting and waiting. And here we go. We're live now. WeatherBrains episode 973 for the 9th of September, 2024. Climatological peak of the Atlantic hurricane season. And by golly, we've got something in the Gulf. But for those that don't know, this is the pre-show. This is the magical, marvelous part of the program where we typically do three things. What do we do here? We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say really outrageous things. So yeah, we'll talk about the situation in the Gulf. The name of the storm is Francine. And might be a hurricane later tonight. Looks like it's coming up on the Louisiana coast on Wednesday. In fact, let me peer into the. Very nice set there, James A. Nice. I like that.
Taking some Mondays off this fall just because the schedule works out this way, and it is hoodies and shorts weather. Right on the edge.
Wow. Wow. That's outstanding. I wish I could do that. We have Monday night football now.
Oh,
So it's always good to take off when you got football because we might be here till midnight or later. You never know with football, but it's okay. Uh, so yeah, let's see here. Let's see what we got.
we actually had a
That's
fire out here
terrifying.
Saturday night. We had a grand time.
A
Ooh, look at
fire.
that.
That's good. Very good. So this is the let's see that the 7 o'clock will probably not have any changes. This is the 4 o'clock
Looked
coming
good
up
on
into
satellite when I saw it earlier.
yeah, it looks the cloud tops warmed a little bit, but the structure looks good. Coming
Mhm.
up on the marshy marshes of Louisiana Wednesday afternoon, and we'll see what happens here, but we'll talk about that once the show starts.
Cottonmouths, mosquitoes, and alligators will be pleased.
I have
Uh,
never been to that part of Louisiana. In fact,
Didn't you go to
I
New
don't
Iberia when
think
during Hurricane Allen?
this was the last time I was kind of in that neck of the woods was Hurricane Andrew.
Andrew, that's right. That's right.
This was in the early
92.
1990s,
Yeah.
and this was a
Didn't that one
long
nearly
time ago.
kill
But this,
Jay? Didn't that one nearly get Jay in the hotel there? Tornado hit the hotel or something? Jay Prater?
um, yeah, we had a tornado that came through Laplace, Louisiana, which is west of
Uh-huh.
New Orleans, and that was pretty crazy. We decided to, and I say I decided to move the satellite truck. And understand, back in those days, you didn't have the live views. You had to have a full blown satellite truck with this massive dish that goes up.
They don't
And
collect wind or
I,
anything.
yeah, I honestly thought we had a chance of getting the morning show live stuff in during the actual passage of the eye. And
Oh,
we got one in, but like a nitwit, of course, the back edge of the eye wall came up on it and stirred up quite the ruckus. And we had to lower that dish real quick. But the damage at Laplace with the tornado was really the one of the
That's pretty
biggest
bad.
stories with the
Yeah.
second landfall in Louisiana. But I've never journeyed down Interstate 10. You know, I've been on Interstate 20 so many times I can close my eyes and see the exit signs driving from Birmingham to Dallas, but I've just never done the Houston drive, which most
Well,
there,
people have done at this stage of their life.
we
there's a
went.
giant bridge over the Atchafalaya Swamp. I mean, it's like 14, 15 miles
Mhm.
long on I-10.
Yeah, we
Can't
went
imagine what that
down
was like.
to Homa and Golden Meadow and Butte, and then drove over to um, Cypremort Port or Cypremort State Park. You know, came up through Morgan City and New Iberia in the summer. The advisor on that's the tropical weather. I'll turn that down. And then drove to Jennings and down to Cameron and over to Port Lavaca and did all that for Hurricane Beryl. So I was going to leave tonight and go to New Iberia, but I'm just too far behind. So I'm going to stay here and watch it and enjoy it from here. So I've got to cancel my reservations in New Iberia.
Pretty sure you won't be the only one.
That's canceling?
Yeah,
Why you think so, James? Because they shifted it back a little to the west?
probably so. I bet people are getting any kind of leisure travel scared about Louisiana right now.
I think they're filling up with people that are there from South Vermilion Parish
Oh, that's a good
and
point.
Iberia Parish and that area. So I'm glad to be giving the room to somebody that probably needs it. I talked to Charles Peak. He was heading down into that area, but didn't know where he was going to end up. This is going to be a pretty good hurricane to chase, I think. So
Go to Costco and get some off on the way. Oof.
yeah, that's one of the things in my
Mosquitoes the size of
checklist.
Toyotas.
Those are the small ones.
Yeah, exactly.
But our guest will be a little bit after 7, James, because he has one of those 30-minute newscasts that's all weather that seem to be the new rage.
Is it a gray station?
I don't know. It's Kansas City, whatever his station is. You probably know off the top of your head, but
Let's not bring too much of that up. Holy cow.
so we can talk about maybe
it's
the hurricane at the beginning or something for 5 minutes or
no,
so.
it's the gray stations. They're doing this. They do a 30-minute weather show. Most all of them are doing a 30-minute weather show after the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah, he's KC TV5.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
What do they do for content when there's not much weather?
Nothing going on. I don't know.
I guess we'll ask
do
him.
it. There's a gray station here, and yeah, we'll ask him when he gets on here. It's nice when you got this.
Center here shortly.
It is very nice when you got something to discuss in the like the tropical situation, but I would imagine it gets a little challenging. But maybe they put some stuff in the can.
I mean, I guess all the gray stations probably share content like that.
I'm sure they do. But I'm just so busy these days. I've not had a chance to see what they do here. It's Wes Wyatt in his group. We still run Wheel of Fortune, which I think is the highest rated program on this channel, aside from football, which is still mind boggling. But it sure helps our 6 o'clock news numbers. That is the one time slot where we still perform very well in the linear television world. We might have the Alabama-Wisconsin game on Saturday.
It's Fox.
An ABC game.
It's Fox.
Fox.
It's the 11 o'clock.
They get the
Fox game.
They get the bonus income.
I guess it's their whatever their big pregame show that's like game day is.
So I got all my stuff done early Saturday at the stadium and went down on the field. I don't do that often, but I just kind of wanted to go down there. I went down in the second quarter, and I was kind of glad I did. That was really interesting. Coach Saban, they named the field after Coach Nick Saban. It's Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and I just kind of wanted to be down there for that, and it was very, very interesting to watch.
Did you get him on the show for October 6th?
I should have. He came up and we talked, and Miss Terry came up and we talked. And I'm thinking, they don't need to be talking to some goober weather guy here. I mean, this is y'all's night.
Yes,
but they
they
were both
do.
very
You
kind.
could be the governor. You're the only two people that
Very,
could probably win the governor's race, hands
um,
down.
no, I was thinking to myself, this guy's got to be drop dead tired because he did
Yeah,
ESPN's
he was
game
up
day
wherever theirs
in
was. Where was it? It was in
Michigan, Ann Arbor,
Michigan. Yeah.
Michigan. And
I
so he
guess.
flew from Ann Arbor to Tuscaloosa, and they had an afternoon event for him outside of the stadium. So he flew from Ann Arbor to Tuscaloosa to be there for that. And then he came back for the game itself Saturday night, and he looked very energized and he looked really good. I mean, um, so that gives me great hope in that he's a little older, not much. He's a little older than me, but the fact that he's got that kind of energy going at that age, that's outstanding. And let's welcome our television viewers. It is now 7 o'clock Central Time. We are on television, and our guest is going to join a few minutes late, so we can get started here. So let's get track 1 and track 2, and here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. WeatherBrains episode number 973. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. We have been on the air since January of 06. Still here, and we got a lot of weather to talk about tonight. This is for the 9th of September, 2024. We are basically at the climatological peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, and we actually have a little action in the Gulf. I'm trying to see who's our closest correspondent. Now, Troy said he might not be able to make it tonight because he's had some stuff he's had to do with this thing. So our Oklahoma correspondents are all here, lined up. We noticed that James Adelot is lounging in his fancy, what do you call this thing? A veranda? What is this? Loggia?
Back porch.
That's a pretty fancy
It
back
looks
porch.
very, very, very inviting. For those that are listening, you ought to go watch the YouTube version.
Yeah, it is hoodie and shorts weather in Oklahoma. I mean, barely. We're just inside that one goalpost, but I'm taking full advantage of it.
What's it? What is that
Wow.
left goalpost? 55-degree dew point, James?
Uh,
What is it?
Probably so. 85 and 85 over 55. But goodness, Saturday was amazing here. We were 1 degree
we had
from a
some
record low Sunday morning too. So
we had some 40s North Alabama
Yeah.
over the weekend. It was good stuff. I mean, just very refreshing. So Kim, how cool have you been in central Oklahoma?
Same. And I mean, Saturday was so amazing. I can't tell you how incredible it was to be able to be outside and Sunday morning feel cold. Like, oh, this is what this feels like. It's been a while. It's been a while. And I noticed a lot of people through the weekend and today there's been all of the bringing out of fall things. I walked into the main lobby of one of the institutes in the weather center, and they already had all of the fall leaves up. They had all of the pumpkin spice, stuff burning, and we're ready. We're ready. We've had that taste. We're just going to ignore the fact that he's coming back for another round at us. So we're just going to totally ignore the fact that we're not any of the moisture from this hurricane, and it's just going to chug off east of us and wave at us while we're sitting here so dry. But we'll take that one day of cool air. It was wonderful.
We see Rick Smith is wearing his Russian hat over there, bundled up after a cool weekend.
Yeah, it was 49 degrees here at my house this morning, so it was amazing. And I went to Stillwater Saturday to work the OSU Arkansas game, and Arkansas was there the first half, and another team was there the second half. But it was beautiful, just perfect football weather, and just like Kim said, just so refreshing to be able to go outside and not worry about spontaneously combusting, and the dry air is just what makes it. The dry air has just been wonderful. So yeah.
Yeah, we It felt good at the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa Saturday evening. It was very dry air mass, just so refreshing. It was outstanding. And typically we are just baking in those early games. So let's go to the Arctic Circle, Jen. Thank you for sending us this refreshing air. We thank you for allowing it to come through your gate.
Absolutely. Yeah. We had some upper 30s and right around 40 up this way. And that was Saturday night and last night too. So I did not turn the heat on. I just had extra blankets and I did shut the windows, but it was gorgeous here the past couple of days and starting to warm up a little bit. I wish we could get rid of the dry air here because it has been bad up in Ohio. So with the drought conditions, some of it, you can have the dry. We don't want it. Everything's crispy up here. I'll talk about that a little bit more later with my pick of the week, but it has been pretty bad up here. I don't even know if we're going to get anything from Francine. It's iffy whether or not we can get that this way. So, but I'll take the cool. That's been great. And then I actually saw a few 90s up here. So we'll see what happens.
Like everything is crispy is certainly a show title candidate for this week. I like that. Everything is crispy. And again, for those that are listening later, a lot of people listen later. We do have a tropical system in the Gulf, Francine. The 7 o'clock Central Time advisory just came out. For those that are watching, the winds are 65 miles an hour. Landfall, Louisiana coast, Wednesday afternoon. Category 2. Dr. Neil Jacobs, what do you think about this thing?
I think I think the forecast is solid. It agrees with the models. I don't really think there's a lot of spread. So, yeah, I'm not surprised to see it develop right there. It's really hot.
Yeah, the Hurricane Center adjusted the track a little westward today, and I think that's one reason Troy had some things he had to do, and that there were some, I guess, watches and warnings that popped up for coastal parts of Texas. But I just love watching these high-res visible satellite images. I just think that's outstanding. I could watch this stuff all day. But we'll talk more about Francine later. But Bill Murray, it's time to bring in our special guest.
Yes, tonight, James, we've got a guest weather brain who is a seasoned meteorologist, works in Kansas City, spent 6 years in Miami, 7 years in Lincoln, Nebraska, covering extreme weather. He has his CBM from the AMS and was recommended by our friend Jeremy Bauer for his expertise in severe weather forecasting and for just being a great all-around guy. Luke Doris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you all. It's an honor. Special guest. Wow. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're the special guest weather brain, Luke. And
Right
I guess, you have one of these 6:30, 30-minute, newscasts that's all weather since you're a gray station, I suppose. So I don't know whether we want to talk about that or not. I need to ask the TV meteorologist on here. Do we want to talk about this or not?
James says, don't do it.
Well, look,
Don't do it.
No,
Don't give anybody
I've
any
got
ideas.
we got millions of questions here. We'll talk about anything here.
That's good. Well, anyway, Luke, before we get into that, let's talk about what got you started in meteorology and how that led you to a career in weather forecasting.
Yeah, everybody's got a story, right? You talk to any meteorologist, there's always something interesting. What got me is I'm a gearhead. I like cars. And my dad's an old hot rodder, and I grew up with, he's built hot rods and dragsters and all that stuff. And I wanted to design cars. So I was in college to be an automotive engineer. And I had a part-time job at a beer warehouse where I ran a forklift. And this was in the St. Louis area. And one day a storm blew in and I hop off my forklift and I'm watching the storm come. And it's a aluminum sided warehouse, big warehouse, Mack trucks pull in and out of this thing. And it got pretty bad. We had an awning in front of the building where cars were pulling off of the highway, which was right in front of the building, to protect themselves from hail. And then while they're parked underneath the awning, the wind picked up and blew it on top of the cars. They'd have been better taking the hail. And it wasn't much longer after that, I heard the building make a sound that I can best describe as if you've watched the movie Titanic, when the ship is halfway out of water and that metal is starting to stress right before it breaks in half. That's what my building sounded like. There's probably a second or two, but enough where I was looking around thinking something's going on, and boom, half that building went down while I was in it. It was not the half I was in, but the other half was blown down. And I thought I was getting hit by a tornado. I thought this was going to be curtains. So I remember I was just running. I didn't have anywhere. There was no safe place to run to. The instinct was just run. And I just was running. And I remember the insulation, how it stayed suspended in the air for a long time. It was really odd. It only lasted, I don't know, 5-10 seconds. Memory is a weird thing whenever you go through an event like that. And it was not a tornado. It ended up being a 90-mile-per-hour straight line wind from a microburst. And I know that because we butted up next to a regional airport. So we had some really good data that I later studied in college. But when that happened, I said, no more cars. I got to know how this happened. How does this happen? So I went off to the University of Oklahoma and pursued meteorology. That was it.
Wow, that's a pretty cool story. I thought I saw Dr. Neil Jacobs' ears perking up underneath his headphones there when you talked about cars. So, Dr. Neil, did that raise any questions that you want to jump into early here before we go further into the weather part?
I don't know about questions, but I was a gearhead growing up. I had a 69 Plymouth Satellite with a 318 that I rebuilt. And it was an awesome car. I had a ton of fun. I could buy any part from Mopar for like $20. Now everything's run by like microchips.
Mm-hmm. Those old that's a great muscle car. Any old Mopar. My dad had a Dart. He had a Dodge Dart with a 383 in it, and he used to talk about how he would run against road runners and all the old hot rodder stories. But you actually had one. I just tell about my dad having one, so that's cool.
Well, I bought this from my dad's dad. My granddad wanted to give it to me, and my dad was like, "You can't give him a car." So I bought it for $500, and then later sold it for like $1,500, like an idiot. I should have kept it.
Yeah, I knew there had to be a little bit of gearhead right there in Dr. Jacobs for sure. So growing up in St. Louis, how did it influence your view on severe weather, Luke?
Well,
and how does that inform your forecasting today?
Well, I haven't been in St. Louis in a while since I was a kid, so I don't know how much of it had an influence on my interest in weather. I don't know about how I forecast today, but we had the flood of '93 was big. I remember watching the local news and seeing a farmhouse get swept away. You know, that's had a big impact on me. I always liked the weather. I just never thought I would pursue meteorology until the storm event for me. But we lived on a lake. We didn't live right on it. We lived close to it, but we had a really good view of the lake. And we would sit on our front porch, my father and I, and we watched storms come in every time. We both loved just watching storms roll in off this lake, and it was just beautiful to me. It was beautiful. I loved it. So that really, set the seed that was finally, I guess, took root by the time that I was in the event, the bad storm that changed my life. But no, it didn't really. It gave me an interest in severe weather, especially back when we had Blockbuster. They used to have video VHS tapes that you could rent on storm chasing and tornadoes. And I, as a kid, I'm talking like 5, 6, 7 years old, would go and rent all of those and watch them. So the interest was there. And then growing up,
the seeds were there way earlier. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, and Dr. Jacobs keeps the thread going here with in the chat. So you can't let that comment go, Neil, without telling us this story.
Well, Kim was making fun of me because I had to crank my outboard motor with a part of a broken rope a couple months ago, and the story. So I would, every time the humidity was really high, the fuel to air ratio would get messed up in the carburetor. And there's these 2 adjustment screws on the top of the carburetor that I could never get right. And I was too lazy to try to figure it out. So I would take a bottle of hairspray and a cigarette lighter and just take the air filter off and just light it and spray it down into the carburetor and then crank it, and it would run fine. Please don't do this at home.
You probably can't do this at home anymore.
Bill has encouraged me. I continue to brainstorm based on the great creativity that Neil has shown. I'm sure a lot of people on this show have seen Iron Chef, and I just couldn't help but wonder, wouldn't it make an amazing program if we had something like that, but for Neil surviving in some strange circumstance, like put him out on the water in a dead boat or in the middle of a desert with a broken car and give him nothing but like random ingredients to have to save himself. And you can vary the ingredients each time. And it would be kind of like MacGyver meets Iron Chef meets Survivor. And I think it'd be great.
Meets the greatest weather modeling expert in the universe. That's for sure. So, and we all love St. Louis. What a great city it is. We got to go there a few years ago for the NWA, Luke, and had a great time there for sure. Now, we were kidding earlier about this 30-minute, weather newscast that the gray stations do, but talk about that for a minute. What challenges does that present to you and to your weather team? How do you feel that content? How has the public, received it, and how's it working out?
Well, it's working out really well. We've only been doing this since April. I think we launched it in mid-April, April 14, and it's going really nicely. And when they first dropped it on us, they being our bosses, they said, "Hey, we'd like to do this. Can we do it?" It was a brainstorm session of how could we fill a half hour. And now we have a tough time shutting up. I mean, we could go for an hour pretty easily. And my concern was on the non-big weather days. If we've got a heat wave in the middle of summer, how are we going to talk about weather for a half hour? But the way that we do it is we structure it like a news block. We've got A, B, C, D blocks, and each one is divided up into, hey, here's your first forecast. All right. Same thing that you would get on your nightly news. And then we'll transition into some wild weather video that's always out there. So you can go look across the internet. You'll find a bunch of interesting stuff from that day or recently. So we go into that segment, and then the next segment might be weather trivia. And then you'll go to break, and you come back from break, and you'll do a planning calendar. All right. So we've got our, this is a big weather market. We've got a lot of weather. We've got a lot of events, especially this time of year. How's it looking as we put those two together? And then we do the next segment may be something that we call a lifestyle hit, which would be, for example, today, we're really crispy, as everybody's been saying today, and that could affect our fall foliage. When are we going to see our fall colors? How could they be impacted by drought? So we'll talk about that. And then a full forecast, no 7 day. All right. So now we've taken what you would normally get in one chunk and split it up into 2, 3, or 4. And that helps fill the gaps. And then we'll have another lifestyle hit somewhere in the block. That would be something like Northern Lights or Francine. Today we talked about Francine. It may actually have some fringe effects here. And before you know it, the half hour is gone. One thing that we also do is we sprinkle in a little bit of news. So we tease ahead to our 10 p.m. newscast, and we've got the 5 things you need to know from the news. So it's a little bit of a marriage between weather and news. It's still kind of a newscast, but I'd say it's 85% weather. And it works out okay. It's a fast moving show. It clicks right along, and it's actually a lot of fun. So it's not a challenge to fill a half hour.
So how many people do you have on your team, Luke? Talk about your other team members.
Okay. So we've got weekend morning, weekend evening, and then myself, and we have a weekday morning. So it's a team of 5. We've got a team of 5. We also have a weather producer. We have somebody that produces the show. Now, they don't produce any graphics, but they do the 3:30 newscast, and then we get to steal her, and then she puts together the weather show for us. That's a must. If you're going to do a half hour, you've got to have somebody to produce it. I don't know how you could do it without that. But when we all come together, she's the glue. I mean, she does all the hard work. Then we end up with a pretty solid show every day. We're getting good ratings, and it's a lot more fun. Some of that when you're on TV, you come in on either side of some rough stories. It just kind of sucks the fun out of it. When it's weather, we're just laughing the whole time. It's a good time.
That's pretty cool. So that's neat. Now you've worked in some diverse areas: Nebraska, Miami, now Kansas City, and I know Jen Nairmore wants to chime in here in a second. But how did all of these different places shape your meteorological ability?
Well, when I went to Oklahoma, all I cared about was severe weather. I didn't even want to be on TV initially. I didn't think that TV meteorologists had the chops. I thought they were broadcasters until I got an internship with Gary England over at KWTV, or KWTV Channel 9 there in Oklahoma City. That totally changed my perspective. So severe weather is what I really wanted to do. Now, your first job out of college, of course, you don't really get to have a lot of pick on where you go. You'll take whoever will hire you. It just so happened to be a severe weather market in Nebraska. And, you know, as sad as it is, you don't learn a whole lot of forecasting in college. Now, we did some storm chasing, and you learn a lot in the field, and you do learn some forecasting, but a lot of it's on the job or internships. So that really helped my severe weather abilities. And then on top of that, you go to Nebraska, you get it all. I mean, we had blizzards, we had heat waves, we had cold snaps, we had flood events. We got it all. So it was a great market to cut my teeth. And then from there, I never thought I'd be a hurricane guy, but Miami called. And initially I said, no, this is not for me. It's not what I'm interested in. In Oklahoma, we had all of about 2 hours of hurricane talk. It's all severe weather. So I said, I don't know. It's not for me. I'm not your guy. And we ended up working out a deal. And I went to Miami for 6 years. And I got really, really lucky because we had a hurricane expert, a hired gun just for hurricanes for the season to break those down. The first one that I worked with was Max Mayfield, former director of the National Hurricane Center. And you talk about a knowledgeable and humble man. I mean, he's a walking encyclopedia, and he just took me under his wing and showed me the ropes. And my first storm was Hurricane Irma. So I wasn't there 6 weeks before we see this Category 5 smashing across the Caribbean, breaking records, and it's pointed right at South Florida. And I have to drink from a fire hose to try to figure out what I'm going to say. You know, I'm on television talking about this thing, and it matters. So Max was instrumental in that, and he really helped me learn what I needed to learn. After that, I worked with Brian Norcross, who's famous in South Florida because he was the lone person that was left on air to walk South Florida through Hurricane Andrew. Everybody else got knocked offline from the storm, and he was able to stay with it. So he built a career out of that, and he is another one that is really, really influential on me, not only from his hurricane knowledge, but also from his passion for good communication, messaging. More than just the science, we have to be good messengers, good broadcasters, good communicators. And you can have the best forecast in the world. If it's not received, then it's a fail. It doesn't land. And he's, in my opinion, one of the best at that. So I became a hurricane guy. Never thought I would, but that really did change what I had set out to do. And I loved hurricanes. But my goal was always to try to get back to the Midwest. This is where my family is. I have identical twin 2-year-old girls and a 4-year-old wild man boy. And we've got grandparents that need to see their babies. So I wanted to get back to the Midwest and Kansas City. I love Kansas. I love Kansas City. It's just a wonderful place. And I wanted to raise my family here. And it's a great weather market. So thank God, here it is. It all worked out. I'm very happy to be here.
Let's talk about Kansas City as a weather market, Luke, because I ask this to everybody who has any connection to Kansas City weather. So I do radio, and I've been on KMBZ in Kansas City forever. I started in the late 90s, and I do radio all across the country. Every market has something unique. There's something about Kansas City that the weather is hard to forecast for. And I just wanted to get your opinion about, you come up from, Miami, and you're in Kansas City, and just the challenges of Kansas City and that whole market. And why I-70 seems to be this miraculous, dividing line between storms and no storms, or rain and ice, or rain and snow. And it's all I-70. North I-70, you get this. South I-70, you get this. So let's hear it.
Boy, does it. That's exactly right. We're always on the line. Kansas City is never in the middle of anything. It's always, we're right there. We're right there. And it makes you want to pull your hair out. It's tough. Yes. As far as why that is, I haven't figured that out. I'm open to anybody's thoughts there. Maybe it's the storms trying to develop as they come east of the Rockies, and they're just not quite there yet. So the computers don't have a whole lot to grab onto, and they're kind of all over the map. But it's just the way it seems to go. And it'll humble you. I mean, any place I've ever worked has humbled me, but Kansas City maybe the most so far. And I've got my first winter here coming up, so that's going to be a ride.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks. I'll need it.
Yeah, no, have fun. I love Kansas City. I've gotten to visit a couple of times. It's such an awesome town, and just wonderful people. And I have just really enjoyed being on the air there for so long on KMBZ, and I was on KCMO there for a little while too. And it's a challenging place to forecast for, no doubt. So if you learn some tips, throw them my way.
And back at you.
Okay.
This will be a two-way educational street this year. So Luke, you threw some famous names out there. Start with Gary England. Tell us a Gary England story we have not heard.
Gary England once told me that back in the day, they had a chopper. They've always had a chopper, but they had their chopper, and it was not uncommon for he and I forget who it was, but somebody that he was pretty chummy with at the station to take the chopper to lunch. And they would fly out to one of their favorite restaurants. I'm talking 90s. You're in prime time. You know, this is the golden age of television for local news. And they would fly the chopper out and land it in a field and then go get lunch. Gary England personally told me that story. So
now that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would mind probably if Gary England landed at your hamburger stand for in the company chopper. So that's a good one. Now talk about Max Mayfield. We love and adore Max around here, and have had him on the show several times back a long time ago. Need to have him on again. We know what you're talking about when you speak with reverence about him, but tell us a good Max Mayfield story.
Max Mayfield, as I mentioned, one of my first storms was Hurricane Irma, and we were staffed up for, I want to say 6 days, 5 or 6 days, where we could not leave the station. The concern was because Irma was so large and we were under its tropical storm force wind field for so long that if people were to leave the station, they wouldn't be able to come back. So everybody's sleeping at the station. And, you know, Max has, I don't know what age he was at this point, but I'm going to say he's in his 70s, probably low to mid 70s, something like that. And he's working hard. I mean, he's on 12-hour shifts for days on end, covering this storm, and it's intense. Well, he goes to bed, and I'm on the overnight shift, and I get the order of, hey, if this thing comes off of Cuba, remember it struck Cuba as a Category 5. This thing comes off Cuba, and we see when it's going to make its turn, go get Max. They put the new guy. The new guy got that job. I said, okay. So we saw it happen in the middle of the night. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. Max hadn't been off television long, just got some sleep. And I have to go up and find Max, which was a challenge. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know, he's somewhere in the building. And I look around, I finally find him in our, like our server room where we have all of our servers or computers. It's just, and he's laying on the floor with one blanket, one pillow, so not a pallet. And I have to wake him up. I say, Max, Max. He jumps up and is immediately sharp. I mean, he's ready for television within 30 seconds. And he went down, you know, had to get ready. Went down and got to work. And that was Max, and got us through that storm.
You know, he just is one of the great, you know, all those National Hurricane Center directors are just amazing over time. You know, there were so many incredible ones. And, you know, we talked a couple of weeks ago about the term, you know, with Alan Seals, weather prophets. And they were true prophets, you know, people like Grady Norton and, you know, Max Mayfield and Neil Frank and all these people. They were just amazing for sure. James A., you wanted to follow up on the other great name that Luke mentioned.
Yeah, Luke, first, Boomer Sooner. Second,
Yeah.
You mentioned Brian Norcross, and we had him on the show. Was there any time that you discovered something that he did not have encyclopedic knowledge of? I mean, he knew engineering and news and weather, and it was amazing.
No, not one time. One time I told him I had a problem with my refrigerator, and he fixed it over the phone for me. He knew how that worked. Yeah. He's like, this is what it is. There's a pass-through tube and something going on there, because he figured it out. He is remarkable.
If it would have been a coolant problem on an air conditioner, his advice is free on Wednesdays. Okay, I'll quit.
Oh, come on.
We can't put our pun emoji on the screen here now, James A. We can only use it in the chat. It's an upside down tornado, Luke. If you can just use your imagination, that's what we use for James's puns on here as he volunteers it. Talk about Jeremy Bowers for me, good friend of the show, and we've always had a lot of fun with him. He's a great photographer. Talk about your how you met him, and you know, he really talked about your ability to reach the public. You know, talk about that part of your delivery.
Well, I met Jeremy when I was in Nebraska. So he was at the University of Nebraska. And we used to have it was put on by the university, a guy named Ken Dewey, meteorologist that was kind of head of the University of Nebraska Meteorology Department. He had this big thing called WeatherFest. And it was great. I mean, all kinds of weather events, weather talks, and a lot of research, a lot of interesting stuff. Kids could come out, anybody with, from kids to people that have their doctorate. There was something for everybody there. And that's where I met Jeremy. And so I was on television. Jeremy was heavily involved with this, and I interviewed Jeremy, and we strike a friendship up, and he starts sending me pictures. And I would put them on TV because they were Jeremy pictures, which are incredible. And so we just got to know each other really well over the years. And he and Chantelli, his wife, and just became friends. Good people, very intelligent, and just love being around them. So I don't know. He'd have to tell you more about how I reach the people. I don't have a good perception of that, but I picked up some things from the people that I've been around that seem to work. And one is I try not to give big packets of information. You know, I don't want you to have to do a lot of work. I'm forecasting when I do it. I try to keep it as simple as possible because, you know, if I give a perfect, complete breakdown, but it's not received by the grandma or the mom that is busy and she's got, you know, her kids that are yelling in the back and she pays about half attention, which I think is pretty common, then it's a fail of a message. So I try to keep it really simple, and especially in high impact scenarios, I try to say, prepare for this. This is the top. All right. This is what could happen feasibly. Most likely this, and best case, it misses us and it's on out of here. And I try to make that understandable and digestible. And that's kind of my tactic. I want most of all to be a good communicator, and I try to teach something interesting. If I can show you the marvel that is our atmosphere and show a little bit of why I think it's interesting, because I think it truly is. And I think a lot of people find it interesting. You talk to anybody, how often do you hear, I almost became a meteorologist? I hear that all the time. Or, you know, coffee talk or at the water cooler, everybody's talking about the weather. It's interesting, I think, to most people. Show them something that maybe they haven't seen before. I try to do that as often as possible. That's kind of it. Just keep it simple and get them prepared when they need to be. Make it fun. Try to teach a little something along the way.
So one of our favorite words on the WeatherBrains show, Luke, is consultant. Not a favorite word of most television meteorologists. Talk about your station's management and their approach to weather.
Well, we are big on weather. I mean, that's why we have the weather show. So we do have, you said consultants, we do have consultants that come in and we see data, and that can kind of steer, you know, anybody that's been in the business, if you're dealing with consultants, it can kind of steer maybe against your instincts. Not always. Sometimes it's good data. It's good information and it helps. But yeah, we're big on weather. I mean, if you don't win weather in Kansas City, then you're not going to win the newscast. That's what I've been told. And that's what the data says. So we have a big push, and we're a first warn station, which is like first alert, you know, which is we try to, our goal is when there's something that is coming, we're going to tell you when we see it and not hype it. It's not a hype machine, but we're just transparency. And I think that's it's been hard for me to figure out that balance, because this is the first time I've dealt with any station. I've worked for any station that has structure like that. In the past, it's just been tell the weather as you tell the weather, but it's not like that at my station now. So we have some guardrails, and with the first warn station, we put that out first. All right. So there's a storm coming 3 days from now. We're gonna tell you about that right off the bat. But that's our approach. We lead a lot of newscasts, and we're on with weather a lot. We get long blocks to do weather. We get a lot of time, over 3-4 minutes sometimes. It's big.
And
hey, Luke, can I let me
jump
ask
in, James. I thought you might want to jump in here.
I'm sorry. Now, I'm sorry, Bill. So, we're seeing this trend in so many station groups where they're under pressure to call these code red weather emergency days for fog or for a day where temperatures maybe are 1 degree above average. Do you feel any pressure to do that that makes you uncomfortable?
No, I don't from my management, but I see how that happens because you get told, hey, we actually even have definitions of what is a first warn or the code red first warn weather day. There are definitions for that. So whenever we were told, hey, this is what we're doing, we're going down this first warn pathway, then it kind of gut instinct, I think, to a lot of the people on staff was, well, now we got to we're talking about this more and we're putting it up higher than in our delivery than we normally would have. And I think it could turn into hype pretty easily that way. And then your message is wrong. You got a bad message. You've made too big of a deal out of something that's not a big deal. That happened enough where our management came to us and said, we need to pull this back, guys. You did a perfect job of doing what we told you to do. Here's the definitions, but it's too much. So we've actually been told, pull it back in a little bit. Let's do a little bit less with that. So we've got good management here. Our news director is really bright. I think he's in tune with what viewers respond to. And I think he is very aware that weather hype is no good. And I'm not down to do that. I'm not down to hype weather. I think sensationalism is a big problem, especially in the social media age. We've got to be the voice of reason, right? Filter out the noise. If we're not that, then we're not doing a service. So it's a tough balance to strike, though. But ultimately, we get to determine, not management. The meteorologists get to determine what is a first warn day, what is a first warn weather day, what's our code red. And if used properly, it can, I think, enhance the message of pay attention. All right, this day could be disruptive. It could, mess up your commute. Your students may have to wear the rain jacket or whatever, or it could be dangerous. It's disruptive. It's dangerous. We just want to let you know. Be aware weather is going to play a role on these days. Doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the world. Just means that, hey, this is our job to tell you when weather matters, and it matters some here, matters a lot here. So we want to elevate that when possible.
Let me bring in James Adelot. James, how does your station kind of structure that situation?
I think he had to run, James. He had a family
a
family auto mechanic emergency he had to go deal with.
Oh, wow. Well, okay. Well, anyway, I'm glad to hear that, Luke, because I know, and they can't obviously come on this show and talk about it, and they don't do it in public, and that's the right thing to do, but they're very frustrated by management and owners to be forced to call these code red weather emergency days when there's no weather emergency. There's no high impact weather event. There's no reason for that. And as you know, the problem is people just get numb. They've heard enough of it every day. Code red weather emergency, da 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 da. And so when there's a real weather emergency, nobody pays attention. And my job is all of our jobs here. It's to mitigate loss of life during high impact weather events. And I don't want us to become like the semi-nude TikTok dancers that hype up, everything. Major Category 5 hurricane to strike Mobile Bay in 3 weeks, and you're only going to hear about it here. And all this nonsense, like you say, on social media. And if we get pulled into that, then people won't know what the truth is. They won't know who to turn to. Everything is hype. And even today, I noticed on some outlets, and I will not say which ones, millions in the path, unprecedented storm. And ultimately, they're going to say it strikes without warning. The same thing every time. It's like they're scripted to say this stuff. So I just have concern. To me, hyping weather events, and I'm not saying you do it, Luke. It sounds like you don't, which is great. But constantly hyping weather events, that's not going to drive people to these old school television newscasts. It's going to drive people away from them. And we're going to lose them. And that's why I hang out in Walmarts and Dollar Generals where real people are, and they're just getting tired of it. We just got to be really careful. And I'm hoping somebody somewhere within the industry will hear a cry from help from practitioners that have to deal with this stuff. It's just crazy. So it sounds like you've got it under control, though. That's so. You make the decision, right? Not some goober ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it does come down to the meteorologist here. But the thing is, and what I think is dangerous, is to find a good job in this business today is getting harder and harder. And if you get one and you're happy to be there, and management's telling you to do something, I think that pressure, even if they didn't tell you, hey, go code red, but you've been given some guidelines, I think that it'd be easy to fall prey to trying to listen to the consultants and listening to people that aren't meteorologists telling you how to run a weather department. I think that could be a problem. I don't know how many people have a backbone and the fortitude and the influence to say, I'm not doing that. I think a lot of people today in this business, which will try to hype everything. I think that's kind of rare, and it's probably getting rarer in a world that's getting more and more competitive, leaner and leaner, lower and lower salaries and longer hours. So I think that's what we really have to watch for, is people that have the guts to say, that's not how we do it. And that's a problem. And it's tough. It's tough to stand up to a boss and say that.
Yeah, it really is. So talk about the future of broadcast meteorology as you see it, Luke, particularly with the social meteorologists and the rise of those kind of platforms and their popularity.
Well, I don't know. I'm just a guy that's, on TV that is interested in weather. So there's a lot more intelligent people than I that can speak to this. But I wonder, because we used to be the gatekeepers of weather information, and we still kind of act like we are when weather information is everywhere. So we still treat it like, join us at 5, join us at 10. Nobody's doing that. And I still think that we behave as though we're giving the forecast. Where in the 90s, you had to wait till 5, 6 o'clock to get the weather. So I wonder if our job is switching away from forecasting the weather. What I mean by that is numerical weather prediction today is getting so good. I mean, you look at the HRRR, some of these high resolution convective allowing models, they can solve the equations of the atmosphere much better than I can. And it doesn't mean that there's not a place for meteorologists right now to forecast the weather. But if we look ahead to what AI may do and machine learning and figuring out model bias and, a human trying to compete with that sometime down the future, I don't know that the return on investment will be there. I don't know. Maybe it will be, but I question that. And I think that our job as meteorologists may switch from, like when I graduated college, it was, you forecast the weather. That's what we've trained you to do. That's your job in kind of a sense. And that's what I thought. I think we now are transitioning to distilling down the impacts to people of a specific event at a specific place at a specific time. What's it mean for the people? What are the impacts, especially high impact events? People are always going to want to be told by a human. Humans want to hear it from humans what the weather's going to do, especially if it really, really matters. And I wonder if that's what the future looks like, where we distill down impacts rather than focus so much on forecasting the weather. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And I bet our friend Rick Smith in Oklahoma can comment on the National Weather Service's sort of transition in that regard too. Rick, what would you say to what Luke just talked about there?
I agree. I mean, we're always going to be involved in the process, and ultimately the forecast comes from us, the warnings come from us, but so much of our job is interpretation, and talking about impacts. How, Luke, you talked earlier about your action days or whatever your station calls them, where this is a day where weather is going to matter. Giving people insight like that, I think, and just being more in the almost in the consulting role or the providing interpretive services. That's what we're thinking in the Weather Service when we talk about decision support services. Being at a football game, being at an emergency operations center, side by side, helping people make decisions. So you can get your forecasts from a lot of different places, but what do you do with that information? How do you interpret it? How do you know what to do with it? That's such a key part of, I think, what we're going to continue to be doing into the future, I hope.
I can't hear Luke, but he doesn't appear to be muted. We may have lost your audio there for a second, Luke. So I don't know if you can connect or reconnect your microphone. Still, are y'all getting the same thing, everybody? Yeah, it doesn't appear to
Not
be muted.
hearing Luke.
Yeah. That's so weird. There's a little bit. We heard just a tiny there. That's better.
I don't know what happened. I was unmuted the whole time.
Seems like it switched microphones. It's much more quiet than it was before.
Yeah, we can barely hear. The audio is probably going to be a little too low here.
Yeah.
About this. Is this any better? This better?
Crank it up some more if you can. Crank her up. Crank her up.
That sounds like a job for Dr. Neal.
I'm sorry, guys.
That's better.
Let me just play this song for a second while we're working on it.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again. Have you tried turning it off and on again? That normally does the trick.
Let's see if it worked.
Much better.
All right.
That worked. That worked.
That was
You're
perfect.
back.
Good. So to follow up on what Rick was saying, I wonder, how much, wouldn't it be good? I don't care what job you're in, communications will help you. No matter if you're selling cars, if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, if you can communicate what it is that you believe or that you think or that you're trying to get across or you're trying to explain to people or whatever, communications, I think, should be top. And as we look ahead to meteorology, I wonder if like you graduate with a meteorology degree, you also get a communications degree, because what good is meteorology if you can't communicate it? That's the whole point of the thing. So I wonder if that's going to take lead as we look ahead. And it certainly sounds like, from what Rick said, that's probably where we're going.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure. We've all been watching Francine all day as it's transitioned from a potential tropical cyclone to a tropical storm and probably a hurricane by morning. With your time in Miami, Luke, have you been watching it closely? And what are your thoughts on this system?
No, I have not been watching it closely. This since I've been here, we just went through a graphics swap. If anybody has been through one of those, it's a lot of fun. So I've been watching it peripherally. But what's been interesting to me about this is how it got into the Western Gulf. Well, it was kind of a combo system where we had the front that was a good rainmaker, and then we had the tropical, the invest, the disturbance, and they kind of meet up right over that bathwater that's the Gulf of Mexico. It's always warm enough in the Gulf to spin this thing up, and it seemed like it spun up a little bit more quickly than was initially forecast. And now Louisiana under the gun, right?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Hurricane Center forecast track slid back about 20 miles to the west this afternoon, but we all know the cone extends all the way from, Port Arthur, Texas to, southern Terrebonne Parish, all the way to the New Orleans area. So, the center can end up anywhere in there. Any thoughts from the panel on the new cone and the inland warnings being a part of it? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Kim, I know you unmuted. Were you going to say something?
Well, my thought isn't necessarily pertaining to this particular forecast and having some, faster than anticipated intensification maybe seems to be the phase of life that we're in. But I want to point out something else, that it's been in the news cycle, like hurricanes and revisiting the seasonal forecast.
Mm-hmm.
So right before this happened, there was all of this messaging going on and a lot of investigation about, well, what happened hurricane season? And it's a hard thing for meteorologists to continue to say, hey, we're just now getting to peak. And, the climatology is one aspect to help us prepare for a season, but you have to also be ready, this whole time. So I think the social scientist in me is really, really interested to see, have people continue to pay attention? Are they continuing to be vigilant? What has happened in the interim since the introduction of this forecast for a season that could be gangbusters, given what you described, Luke, the bathwater that is the Gulf, and just all of the potential that has been there and is still there. And now we have a system that's spinning up kind of fast. This is the kind of thing that it was the fear, going into this season, that something could do something like this, could become a very concerning system, whether we could predict that or not. So I think that's a bit of an interesting piece to this whole puzzle. Is it was just in the past couple of weeks that a lot of media outlets have started to probe around and ask these questions as we've been entering the height of hurricane season, and here we are with a landfalling system.
Dr. Jacobs, you got a couple of thoughts there. Why don't you follow up on what Kim said and give your thoughts on the cone?
I mean, I love the cone. I think it's awesome. The NHC's done a ton of work, but I might be biased because Jamie's my friend. But I always get nervous when storms take this track through the northern part of the Gulf, because they always tend to overperform and with rapid intensification. I'm not saying that's going to happen this time. I haven't really been watching the models, but they almost always seem to come in a category higher than people think for some reason. And so I would watch it closely for sure. But I've got a pick of the week, and I won't announce it now, but I've got this theory, and I'm not sure if I should talk about it now or during the pick of the week, but I have a theory on why this hurricane seasonal forecast has been a bust so far.
Do you want to go ahead and share some of it now?
We need to hear this right now, right now.
All right. So, I mean, all the ingredients were there. The water's excessively hot, the shear's favorable, and everyone was basically, and myself included, were like, this is going to be a record-breaking year. And then it was like, it's just been a total flop so far. And there's one thing that's different if you go back and look through like decades of analogs, and that is what happened in January of 2022. There was this volcanic eruption from Hunga Tonga, and it put about 150 million tons of water vapor in the stratosphere. And my theory, and there's papers coming out on this, and there's got to be a lot of people looking at this, so I may have to wait a year or 2 or 3 to see if anyone actually is able to reproduce this in the models. But I think what's going on is it's disrupting some of the Hadley cell circulation, because a lot of the ITCZ relies on latent heat release. And it's really hard to get condensation and latent heat release higher, because you need moist air moving into dry air. If you have moist air up there, you're not going to get the latent heat release, because you're not going to get the condensation. And I think it's disrupting the circulation, and it might be damping the convective initiation. I don't know that we would see something like that like in the northern area of the Gulf, but these storms like that normally come off Africa, I think there might be something going on there. And it's the only thing that that's the only other thing out there. It's either that or it's something no one's thought of yet. But what's wild is there's a lot of studies that are showing like this is the water vapor that's in the stratosphere now. It's going to take like 10 or 20 years to come back to like normal levels. And it's asymptotic. So it's probably going to be a pretty long time. My concern is if we don't have a way to generate convective initiation to drive these hurricanes, to remove the heat from the ocean, you're going to have all sorts of like crazy, reefs getting killed, water temperatures are astronomical, and there's no way to unload the heat. That's what I'm worried about. So anyway, that's a theory. I have absolutely no evidence to prove this other than just the stratospheric water vapor measurements that are just ridiculously high. And that's the only thing different that wasn't in any of the climate models or forecasts. So have to wait and see on that one.
So is that what's been going on? People who are more familiar, who are watching the tropics intently, I'm curious if it has seemed to be the case that where you would otherwise have a tropical wave that you would expect to develop, it just hasn't. from just so this sort of surface following that I've done, there'd been some discussion too on potential shifting of the latitude of the systems typically coming off of Africa. Maybe some of the inhibition too from the dust of coming off of the continent. So can you describe, are you weighing that in your judgment? So even despite those potential influences that have seen,
no, I think those
some discussion.
influencers are being impacted by this. So the dust coming off of Africa, the shifting of things of north, all that is related to the westerlies and the Hadley cell circulation, which I think is being altered by the stratospheric water vapor. I don't know that I can't explain the exact physical mechanism, but I know that these things are correlated. I can't prove any causation because I haven't actually looked into it other than I've read like 5 papers. But there's definitely a correlation there, and this is the one variable that hasn't been accounted for.
And Neil,
And
can I ask you a question?
yeah, go ahead, Luke. I know you have some interest in this area, so I want you to explore your thoughts also.
So is there any relation? Can we look back to, what was it, the 70s, where there was a lull in the Atlantic hurricane activity? And then there was the Clean Air Act, and it reduced the pollution. And because we had cleaner air over some time, it actually allowed the waters to warm more, and we got a spike. We got more hurricanes from cleaner air. We had all the aerosols, all the pollutants in the atmosphere that we had scrubbed out. Is there anything like that? I mean, obviously the stratospheric water vapor is what you're pointing to. Is this kind of similar in how it impacts Atlantic hurricanes? Do you think is that a reasonable corration or analogy?
I mean, I haven't really thought about it like that. I mean, water vapor does certainly, it's the strongest greenhouse gas, not necessarily produced by, CO2 or anything, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that like when you're looking at like aerosols and pollution, there's some aerosols that actually would initiate convection because they are like a condensation nuclei, and there's other aerosols that would actually damp out the downward shortwave radiation from the sun. I don't know to what degree we were taking measurements back in the 70s that we could build that into sort of the reanalysis. That to me is sort of the big unknown. Like we've got pretty good data of what the global reanalysis would look back going that far, but I don't know that we've got the aerosol measurements globally that anyone could sit there and these are all things that people have just been tossing around over the last 2 or 3 months when no hurricanes showed up and everyone was like, what happened? So I think the next year, I would love to think that this particular topic and what's the cause, and are there any historical analogs that we can point to, like whether it's man-made pollution or other eruptions or things like that, would be pretty cool to see. Because if people can actually get past the correlation and explain the causation with some physics in the models, then they can replicate this scenario, then they should be able to go back to past events and properly replicate those, because it's not like the physics was different back then. We just don't have the same set of observations. So yeah, hopefully some new exciting budding researchers out there looking for a PhD topic. This is a good one.
And Luke, I've got one more question before James asks all the hard questions. So we save him for last. He's like that closer we bring in. So gird yourself. But the last thing I wanted to ask you, it seems like you have an interest in weather history, which several of us on this show do. So talk about things you've looked into about historical events and how they influence modern weather forecasting.
Have you had Dr. Kerry Emanuel on the podcast?
No, we haven't. He's on the list of guests for this round 3. We're going into what, James? We're in our 19th year now. So yeah,
19.
I tried a long time ago to get him, but I think now is a really good time to try to get him on the show.
Well, I don't want to steal too much of his thunder because it's from what I'm about to talk about is from his book. His book is called Divine Wind, and it is remarkable because it splits up between one chapter of describing tropical meteorology, and then the next chapter will be some interesting or impactful tropical event, and they're wild. One of the first ones in the book, he does this chronologically. So he starts with the oldest stuff first, is he's talking about the Mongolian Armada. So the Mongolians were this just horrible spreading empire. They killed so many people, apparently, that they lowered the carbon footprint in the atmosphere, and so many people had lost their lives that the atmosphere cooled because of less CO2, apparently. So anyway, massive army, and they decide that they're going to take to the sea, and they're going to build the largest armada the world had ever known, and they're going to go take Japan. So they do that. They've got this huge armada. They sail out to Japan. They're off the shore. Japan wouldn't stand a chance against the Mongolians. And as they're just offshore, horrible typhoon strikes, and the whole armada pretty much is wiped out. So what's left of them sail back, and they recoup. 2 years later, they try it again. They come back a second time. They're right offshore, about to take Japan. This armada is even larger, and they get hit by another severe typhoon that wipes out the fleet pretty much. They never try it again. And the Japanese, they coined the event kamikaze, which we think of kamikaze as World War II and the airplanes, and it actually means divine wind. Japan was saved by these terrible storms that ended up wrecking the Mongolians. So that was always just an incredible tale that he had told there. But he also, in his book, he talks about how Christopher Columbus, and he runs into some hurricanes, and you could argue changes the course of history in some ways, not unlike the Mongolian event. And then there's another one about Admiral Bull Halsey, and he is in the Pacific Fleet, and he is trying to navigate his way toward the Japanese, and they have some sense of meteorology at this point, and he's told go a certain way. He couldn't quite get there. It's been a while. The details are fuzzy, but he ends up running in his fleet into a severe Pacific typhoon, and much of his ship, he gets a lot of damage, and a lot of lives are lost. And then it's the very next year, I do believe, they do it again. I mean, it was a small, apparently very compact, very intense typhoon that they run into a second time. And that time they had seen it on radar, apparently, because they had radar technology, but they didn't know how to interpret the signal, what they were looking at. They didn't know what it was. And they sail right into a very powerful typhoon. And Admiral Bull Halsey says that he was more terrified of typhoons than the Japanese. If you can get him, I mean, his stories and what he has studied and he shares, it's just remarkable.
I'm going back here and digging that book out of my library tonight. So
you read it?
I've got it right back here, and I read it probably 20 years ago, and I'm going to dig it out and read it again, Luke.
There you go.
I'm going to turn it over to any of the panelists. Last chance to ask Luke any questions, although I hope he'll stick around till the end of the show if he can. But
hey, Luke, do you have a 9 o'clock tonight or 10 o'clock?
I've got a 10, so I can hang for another little while yet.
Okay, good. So give us a day in the life. What's a typical day for you like? Weekday. Go.
So I get in at 2 if it's quiet. If it's not quiet, then who knows? I could be in as early as...
I don't mean just working. I mean, when do you wake up? Give us the whole day. I want to know the whole routine here.
Okay, so I'm up at 5:45 because we've got identical twin girls and a 4-year-old boy that we've got to get up, and they're up at about 7. So my wife and I, if we're going to get a workout in, and if we're going to we do a Bible study together every morning. And if we're going to get that in, you got to do it before the kids are up. So we're up at 5:45, do that together. And then we get the kids up, and from there it's chaos, just, running them around 2 days a week. I have to take my boy to preschool. So he just started pre-K, and, we go through the whole routine, breakfast, bath time, go outside, have some fun as a family. Hopefully that's one big perk of this shift is you get your mornings with your family. I just love that. So especially here this time of year where we get to go on a walk, it's just beautiful outside. Great way to start your day. So we'll do that usually by about noon or 11:30. I'm getting ready. So that's shower time and makeup, all that kind of stuff. And from there, drive into the office. I'm into the office by 1:30 or 2 o'clock. And once we're in, there's so many recordings that we do. We have to record what are called headlines. And what those are, the little teases that you see before the newscast. So that's how my day starts. And then I meet with my producers, tell the producers what the weather story is after looking briefly at the weather data. Then after that, I do a complete forecast and put together my show, stack my show, radio weather, all of that. And then we go on 5, 6, 6:30 is the weather show. We do a lot of online stuff in between. And then there's a break to kind of recoup for the 10, but it's a lot of online work at that point. And web text, and like you've got your blog, it's kind of like a blog that we update. Do the 10, off by 10:35, home by 11. Try to crawl into bed and get 5 hours of sleep if I can. Do it all over again. I know that you're up at you get like 4 hours of sleep at night, so I think you've got
3. I sleep 1 to 4 a.m. So, but yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm only 22 years old. This is what you look like when you never sleep. You wind up looking just like this. Your hair falls out and you look like you're 100 years old. So tell us about how you handle social media, which is the 800-pound monster that we have to deal with. How much time does it take? How do you approach it? What platforms are you on?
Well, there are people that are far better and understand social media more deeply than I do. I am not a social media guru. I do not understand it. I don't know why certain things get traction and others don't. I wish I had that, because there's times that you want to get important information out. But the way I handle it is I try to be consistent, and don't follow me if you want constant tornado warning, severe thunderstorm warning updates. I try to message that. Rely on your NOAA weather radio, not the guy that's on social media. I'm busy while those events are going on. I'm on air and I'm focused on that. And I don't have the bandwidth to be posting. And I don't want people to get used to that and rely upon that. So mine is typically once a day. I will post what I find to be the pertinent information that people should know in the near term. Maybe it's 7-day forecast. Maybe it's 4 different things, but whatever's interesting or whatever could be impactful, just share that. And that's about it for me. Now with my station, we're posting stuff 5, 6, 7 times a day, just constant updates, whether it be, the next 24 hours or the next 7 days. That's how we handle that. So that's my philosophy.
So which platforms now? Tell me what you're on here if we want to follow you.
Okay, I'm on Instagram, but not much weather. That's just kind of personal stuff. I do some professional stuff, but it's an open account. But that's more if you want to follow me for my life. That's what that is. I'm on Facebook, meteorologist Luke Doris, and on Twitter @Luke Doris. I am not creative, so that's where you can follow me. The Facebook account, the Twitter account, pretty much all professional.
So, are you on TikTok?
I am not on TikTok. No, I'm not.
Not one of those semi-nude TikTok dancers that does their own hurricane forecast, right?
I won't get those likes. I'm not there. You won't find me.
Yeah. And I say this all the time. Whenever I open up TikTok, I get one of 3 things. They're dancing, they're funny, or they're cussing. One of the 3. And, but whenever there's some high impact event, I will go on the talk. In fact, I went on there today and I'll edit a video and, portrait perspective and not long, because younger people don't like long stuff. But I loaded that thing up today with a tropical system. I'll do it every morning this week. But the only time I get on the talk is to do that. Anyway, so we have to take a break, Luke. So if you can hang on for a few more minutes, we're going to take a break and hear from Tony Rice, and he has an astronomy report. We've got Jen this week in tornado history. We will come back with our picks of the week, an update on the tropical system, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Weekend weather forecast.
Whoa, hit the wrong button. See, that's why you got weather people should not be producing these shows. Let me try that again. We'll be right back as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
There could be a new star appearing in the night sky in the coming weeks. It's really not that new, quite old in fact, near the end of its life. Astronomers have been watching a white dwarf star in the constellation Corona Borealis. The Blaze star, also known to astronomers as simply TCRB, is a binary system nestled in the constellation Corona Borealis, also known as the Northern Crown. It's in the western sky about halfway between the bright stars Vega and Arcturus. TCRB is about 3,000 light years from Earth. It's made up of an Earth-sized remnant of a dead star, but with a mass comparable to that of our Sun. Keep in mind that our Sun comprises 99.8% of the mass of the entire solar system. All that gravitational pull is slowly stripping away hydrogen from its nearby red giant neighbor. This causes a buildup of pressure and heat. And eventually, that triggers a thermonuclear explosion that's big enough to blast away all that accumulated material, which is hurtled out into space in a blinding flash that appears to us here on Earth briefly as a star, visible for a couple of days. So why now? That buildup and blast appears to reoccur, on average about every 80 years, and it's due. TCRB has been behaving the way that it did before an outburst back in 1946. So astronomers are pointing to this month as the next possible occurrence. Now don't confuse novas with supernovas, a final cataclysmic explosion that destroys some dying stars. In a nova event, the dwarf star remains intact. But there's another star that astronomers have been keeping their eyes on, and that could go supernova, Betelgeuse. Talking about the star in Orion, not Beetlejuice, played by Michael Keaton in the films of the same name. Astronomers have been watching Betelgeuse and how it behaves for a while now, and they theorize it could go supernova, an event that would make it visible even in the daytime sky for weeks. But don't set your lawn chairs up tonight quite yet. Supernova events are incredibly hard to predict. It could happen this week, or it could take another 10,000 years. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, Hurricane Ivan made landfall as a Category 3 on September 16, 2004, just west of Gulf Shores, Alabama. There was a massive 3-day outbreak of 120 tornadoes that occurred with the passage of Ivan. At least 8 people were killed and 17 were injured. 4 of the deaths are attributed to an F2 in Calhoun County, Florida on September 15th. The tornado developed just southeast of Van Lierop Road. It moved across Highway 69 near the Stafford Creek Bridge. Numerous roofs were damaged and trees were uprooted. The twister then moved into the Macedonia community, and this is where the fatalities occurred. 1 mobile home was thrown across the road, killing James Melvin Terry, age 55, and his daughter Donna, age 35. James Marshall and his wife Mary were killed when the tornado struck their home. A total of 5 injuries occurred along the tornado's 7-mile path. You can read more about this event at tornadotalk.com.
All right, time now, ladies and gentlemen, to dive into the email inbox to see what's in there.
All righty. So we're going to start this email up a little bit here. Got this week. A longtime WeatherBrains fan here, but first time emailing. I'm an architectural historian. I'm going to stop right there because I think we were all intrigued by this tornado with this email. Obviously, I have tornado talk on the brain with this email, with just those first couple of words here that we decided we wanted to invite the emailer onto the show. Emily Foster, welcome to WeatherBrains.
You guys, I am so honored and just excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Yay! We're honored to talk to you. I just wanted to let you know we loved your email, and we just were intrigued by what you wrote, and it all had to do with last week's show. And so, but first talk about, you said that you were a bit of weather geek since you were a kid, and you loved weather history, and especially how storm events affect our built environment. So just kind of talk about your love for weather and how it kind of correlates to what you do for a living.
Yeah. So I going back to when the weather bug bit me, I was 9 years old. I grew up in West Central Florida around the Tampa area, saw my first tornado, and it was literally an F0. It was very weak, not a big deal, but it freaked me out. And it freaked me out enough that it was during the summertime. I asked my mom to take me to the library because it's back in the 1980s and, no internet to look up stuff. So I researched all that I could about how tornadoes form and all of that. And unfortunately, I'll just admit, I'm not a math brain or physics brain. I had some dreams of attending Florida State for meteorology, but I decided to pivot in high school And my love of history and especially of architecture carried me forward through college and graduate school. And I've worked for the last 17 years in local government as an architectural historian and historic preservation planner. I will say, living in Florida, I've seen a lot of buildings impacted by not only tropical storms, but flooding events. Even here where I am in Lakeland, which is inland Florida, we're in between Tampa and Orlando. We've got some historic buildings downtown that have basements. And so there's water intrusion from flooding events and also just groundwater and, damp rising, as we say. So just kind of looking at, weather is probably the biggest impact on historic buildings and our built environment. Keeping moisture out of buildings is a big thing. Also, especially with historic wood buildings like my bungalow that I live in a 1924 bungalow, allowing the building to breathe. A lot of times people want to make their homes energy efficient by sealing them up, and you really can't do that with a historic home. It really does need to breathe. So I'm rambling now. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
No, we're so honored to speak with you. This is such an intriguing thing. We love who listens to the show because there's weather geeks are just expand all kinds of different genres, and it's interesting to see your connection and how what we learned from you. And I wanted you to kind of piece through your email a little bit. And I want to bring Neil in too after you do that, because he's got a couple of comments. Kim was intrigued as well by you. So I think we're all going to probably be clamoring to ask you a couple of questions. But take us through, first of all, you mentioned, because we were talking about Josh Morgan's home and how it's cute as can be and it's awesome. And so talk a little bit more about his construction and what your comments were about that. And then kind of pivot into Hurricane Michael and some of the homes down that way too.
Yeah, and I've got a show and tell for you guys.
Oh, great.
So with Josh Morgan's home in Bay St. Louis, I thought it was amazing. He designed it very well. It fit in very compatibly with the Old Town historic area that he lives in. So very well designed. But as far as fortifying his home to be more resilient to tropical systems, I thought that was amazing. He built his house up at a raised elevation, so the foundation is raised on a stem wall, again to combat floodwaters. He reinforced all of the roof trussing and the connections in the walls to the foundation. Using fiber cement siding is another good and compatible choice for siding material, and very resilient to the effects of weather. The shutters on his windows were phenomenal. I'm constantly here in Lakeland. People are more and more concerned about how do they protect their window and door openings, and we've just recently allowed hurricane fabric with anchoring to be placed around the openings as a compatible treatment and as a balance between preserving the architectural integrity of a building as well as protecting it. So anyway, all of those factors with Josh's house, I would love to see it one day. That was fascinating.
And then from Mexico Beach, and some of you were talking about the home, I guess we mentioned about the 1908 house and all that kind of stuff. And so, anything you want to share about that? You said the old growth lumber of that 1908 structure likely played a huge part in that house surviving in Michael.
Yeah, I've seen that time and time again. And old growth lumber is basically just lumber that is used in the construction of older buildings that is usually 100, 200 years old. I mean, it's stuff we can't get any longer. And modern, construction grade lumber is milled and is farmed. So I do have a little, if you don't mind me sharing this, I've got an example of old growth lumber, and it's actually from my 1924 house. So it's 1920s. You can see how close the growth rings are there. Mm-hmm. And then the modern lumber. So, and they're also not always, but Usually the older lumber is dimensional, being that it is actually 2 inches by 4 inches, where the modern lumber is not quite. It's a little bit smaller. So I think those factors, the growth rings being so close together really provide a tight bond and help the building to stay together. Obviously, that 1908 house was probably very well anchored as well. But yeah, that's just a theory.
Oh, that's awesome. Neil, what did you want to bring up?
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I live in a bungalow in North Carolina. It was built sometime between 1915 and 1920, and it's all old growth, original, unsanded lumber.
Nice.
And it's so dense. I ended up when I got this house, I rewired it and I had to drill through some of the joists. And I went through multiple drill bits trying to drill through the wood because it was that dense. It's pretty unbelievable, but my foundation is on pillars. So I totally hear you when you talk about stuff moving around. Like I've got summer cracks and winter cracks. And on my front door, I've got a latch placement and I have drill holes for the summer and drill holes for the winter. And it's offset by probably 3/4 of an inch. And if I'm not careful, at some point mid-season, I won't be able to shut my front door. So yeah, it's but one thing that is technically maybe not impervious are my front columns. I was going to save this story, but I'll just tell it now because it's kind of related to old houses. So 2 days ago, I'm sitting on the sofa and I hear like all this beating, and I thought it was a woodpecker on the rain gutter because sometimes they'll get on the rain gutters and start making a lot of racket. I went outside in the front yard yesterday, looked at one of the columns, and this woodpecker drilled like a perfect hole into the column. But I should say that is not old growth. It's not even treated wood. It was something that I installed, I guess 5 or 6 years ago. And now I have to tear down my Christmas lights to rebuild it. So I'm going to wait until after Christmas.
Very cool.
Anybody else want to say anything, have questions or?
Yeah, Emily, I would love to know what is there in all of the work that you've done, is there a building or a set of historic buildings that have been lost to weather that maybe you tried to save or, were beyond saving, just broke your heart? Like, tell us a little bit about that intersection, because I think when we see weather impact places, we're so often agnostic to the meaning of the things that are being impacted. We see those dollar figures of insured losses, whatever. But what you're bringing here is there's community meaning to these things, and there's everything that history entails, and even an arc of history of how people have adapted to places. Sometimes people have been maladaptive coming in from other places. I'm intrigued by there being basements in Florida. This strikes me as maladaptive. Someone came from the north, thought you could do that. But I would love to hear from your point of view. What have been some of those stories?
Yeah, so that brings up a lot of different thoughts. I will say something that immediately triggered my brain was back in 2019, we had an EF2 tornado come through Lakeland, which is actually kind of strong for this area. And it was, I believe it was spawned by some feeder bands from a tropical storm. It happened in October. And it unfortunately damaged a very small frame vernacular church, like kind of your typical Carpenter Gothic architectural style, beautiful little white church that was kind of outside of the city limits, but it had been relocated from a historic district prior to the historic district being designated. But it was basically just south of downtown, relocated just outside of Lakeland. And this, crazy tornado came out of nowhere and damaged it to the extent that it couldn't be rebuilt. And it wasn't protected by historic designation. But I just feel it was a Lutheran church, and I felt like it was still part of our community. And I am going to document the history of that church at some point, so that it won't be lost, to memory. The other, a happier story, during that same tornado event, a 1928 middle school was damaged to our northeast, and it did a lot of damage to the roof and blew out some windows, but they were able to restore that building, and it's currently back in service. And so, it was a preservation win in that case.
That's awesome. I just, as somebody who writes tornado history narratives, and we, follow the path, and there's so many buildings that we try to find. I mean, there have been so many buildings that we've noticed have been on the historic registry, and,
Yeah.
it's just, it's important to document that type of information. I mean, that is part of our history, and I love what you do, and it's just so neat. I'm so glad that you wrote, and as we were going back and forth on email, you said that you're a trained Skywarn spotter,
Yeah.
and you have a personal weather station as well. So thank you. You're part of the weather community just as much as we are.
Oh,
and
thank you guys.
you add
It
to
means a
it
lot.
with, so don't be surprised if you don't get an email from me at some point going, okay, so I'm tracking this tornado.
Yeah.
And this happened. Help me figure this out. So
I would love to help you with,
That would be
building
awesome.
history.
That would be
Sure.
amazing. That would be awesome. So Emily, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And Bill, thank you for fixing our email so we know that Emily wrote that email. And that was highly important to know that too. But please send your email to email@weatherbrains.com. We love just hearing from you. What did you think about the show? What questions do you have? Who can we have on the show? Just like we had Luke on, and it's just been amazing. So thank you so much for that. And I will send it back to James Spann.
Emily, thank you. That was outstanding. And before we get into picks of the week, Dr. Jacobs, you want to explain this photograph we got here?
Wow.
Yeah, that's the woodpecker attack. It just drilled a hole straight through the
That's
wood.
a big old hole.
Well, it looks
Yeah.
bigger than it is. It's probably about 1.5 inches. And I saw the culprit, but not in action. It's a small downy woodpecker. And those are my Christmas lights that I leave up year round because my neighbors love the cheer. And I'm too lazy
It's
to
the
take them
season. I
down.
mean, hey, I listen to Christmas music in March. Those songs are so good. Why would you listen to them just like 1 month out of the year? So I like it. I like it a lot. All right. So, and real quick, let me kind of go back to the tropical system. And Neil, while you're on the line, any particular thoughts about Francine that we should know about tonight?
I mean, just I think the forecast is good. The spread in the models is tightening up. I would just be really, really vigilant about watching, not necessarily the lateral shift or the track, but any potential for rapid intensification. And that whole area along the track and east of the track is very low lying. So just be, just listen to your state and local emergency managers and follow instructions, do what they say. If they say to leave, get out, because it's not worth trying to, wait it out.
Doc, do you know much about the halves A and the halves B and those two new models that are sort of our repertoire the last couple of years, what their background is and what your thoughts are on those and the other hurricane models?
Yeah, so halves A, halves B, they're a little bit different. They have a little bit different data simulations, ocean data. The initialization is slightly different. The physics are slightly different. I think certain ones perform better in different scenarios. They're both going to eventually end up replacing the HWRF and the HMON and those other models. The HAFS modeling system is part of the unified forecast system. So those are models that basically fall under the work that I do with development of the UFS. So definitely, I'm pretty excited about it. It's like anything else. Anytime you put a model out there right off the bat, it might not perform as well as the models that have been in operations that have been highly tuned for years. But this right out of the box was performing pretty well. So I think that, you never want to like release a model and then turn off the other stuff right away. If you've got the compute resources, you ideally want to run things in parallel for a couple of years and compare everything and then, don't turn off the old stuff until you're absolutely convinced the new stuff is better. But I think we're approaching that. So the HAFS systems will definitely be the go-to systems moving forward.
Was that the HAFS-B you were showing, James?
Yes.
Because it's showing a 963 or so landfall around Marsh Island around noon on Wednesday. But it had been a 99 knot hurricane earlier that morning, so it was beginning to slowly weaken. I guess feeling the effects of the shear. So that's just one option that is on the table tonight. That is a very, very vulnerable part of the coast right there, Vermilion Bay, right south of New Iberia and Lafayette.
All right. Well, let's kind of morph into picks of the week. This is where we're going to go around. Everybody's going to share something weather related. First off, you guys are talking about Kansas City barbecue. So, Luke, what do you say? Best Kansas City barbecue. Go.
Well, this will break out in fistfights if anybody's listening from KC. For me, it's Blind Box. Blind Box is not a common one. You don't hear a lot about it here. You've got your staples. You've got your Oklahoma Joes and your Jack Stacks and all those Gates. For me, it's Blind Box. Best barbecue around that I've had.
Write it down. And haters, again, that's Luke at luke.com or something. Don't send the email to us.
Although
so
you can
this
now.
is where we go around the horn, and we're going to share something that is weather related. This can be a data source, website, hardware, anything remotely related to weather. And we will put the links up on the show notes on weatherbrains.com. So, Kim, let's start with you. I bet you've got something really good for us this week.
Oh, I was worried you're going to say this. I'm going to save myself from the foghorn by virtue of, admittedly, a little bit of self-serving. It's my first article I've been quoted in talking about space weather, some of the work I've gotten to do supporting SWPC. But I appear alongside the one, only incomparable Bill Murtaugh. And we talk a little bit about the space weather scales and the impetus for changing them and updating them in the modern world.
Very good. And again, the link will be up on weatherbrains.com. Let's go down the road to Rick Smith. Rick, give us something really good.
My pick is one that I think Troy shared sometime last year, but it's sondhub.org. This is a website that's crowdsourced, and people are tracking weather balloons all over the world. But it's really cool because we can track the weather balloon that we launch. We can kind of track it and see where it's going to land. You can click on the balloon and get a sounding. You can get a forecast of where the balloon, using data from where the balloons have been over the past week or two. Where this balloon, the website has been there for a little while, but I think they've enhanced it recently. So that's my pick. It's just fun for weather geeks and balloon geeks and aviation people just to track things floating through the air and finding out where they're going to land. So that's my pick.
It's out. That thing is outstanding. It's a time suck. I will say I waste too much time playing around with that, but it's nothing but fun. It's great stuff. All right, Neil Jacobs, give us a good one. Go.
So my pick of the week is from Geophysical Research Letters, and the paper is Antarctic Vortex Dehydration in the 2023 as a Substantial Removal Pathway for Hunga Tonga Water Vapor. And it's a pretty cool paper. It talks about the amount of water vapor scattered in the stratosphere, and it also talks about modeling the dissipation of the water vapor, which takes an inordinate amount of time. So if my theory ends up being, I guess, not falsified, then we might be in for several underperforming hurricane seasons.
And I do think it's kind of scary without the heat transfer, Neil. I mean, what happens to the oceans?
It gets really hot. I mean, that's other than the Gulf Stream, there's not, western boundary currents are one way to move warm water to the poles. The other one is just, heat removal through the surface with the storms. And if you remove that, you have some really hot water. So I think there's going to be a lot of biological and ecological downstream impacts if we can't figure out, or I guess nature can't, decrease the amount of heat in the ocean.
Yeah, but that again, everything you said makes perfect sense about what's been going on this year. So it's very interesting. All right, James Adelot, you're back. You were back from your emergency mission. Is all okay? Is everything is well?
All is okay. The kids are home from dance and basketball, and hopefully mother-in-law gets a new battery soon. So yeah, it was an interesting evening. I am sending along 3 papers on cold season tornadoes and climatological and meteorological insights of those, with various things like El Nino and ENSO and uh, the various oscillations and so on and so forth. So it all paints to a great big, when I kind of flip through them, just not quite sure what winter will hold, but we'll see.
Awesome. And again, my pick, the Hurricane Center has their new experimental cone available. And if you've not seen that, I put a link to that. That'll be my pick of the week. All right, Luke, we have stalled to give you a chance to think of something really cool. And I bet you know of something that's really good you can share with our audience. So give us a good pick of the week.
Well, I was not prepared, so I'm having to dig for it to find it.
Neither we're not prepared either. We just go off the cuff. So you'll fit right in with us.
Well, we were talking about Dr. Kerry Emanuel earlier, and he has modeled apparently, and if the world were warm enough at certain temperatures, some supersonic hurricanes is what the computer models had spit out. I forget what he calls them, but he's got a research paper about this. So I need to find that, and then I'll give you the link. And another one, just so if you want a link that I think I visit almost daily, Cool Weather, WX, the abbreviation.com, coolweather.com. And it just shows across the globe today, what was the hottest spot? What was the coldest spot? Just interesting little tidbits like that. It's kind of interesting.
Outstanding. And again, we'll put links up on weatherbrains.com. Okay, Emily, you probably were not prepared for this either, but we're going to throw it on you. Give us a good pick of the week.
And she's muted.
Uh-oh. Unmute thyself.
Okay.
You can hear you.
Obviously, newbie. So yes, I came prepared just in case this was offered to me.
Yes.
Yes. I'm going to offer it's a brochure that was just published in July of 2024 by the city of Charleston, South Carolina, and it's the resilience guidance for historic properties. I think it has, like I said, a lot of relevance for properties throughout the Southeast. It covers a lot of building systems and how to fortify buildings for protection for climate change and sea level rise.
Neil Jacobs has been to Charleston a time or two. I think Neil might want to read that. Neil, you ever been to Charleston, South Carolina?
Yeah, every other week.
Yeah,
and
there
it's
you go.
definitely
Well, that's great.
underwater half the time.
Yep.
There you go. So we'll put a link up on weatherbrains.com. All right. So as we get ready to tie this thing up, again, Luke, anything else we need to plug on your behalf? This is your chance to plug anything you want to plug. Go. Oh, and Bill Murray, he's waving his hand like, hey, wait a minute.
Don't forget Jen. We skipped Jen.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You ought to see the paper that I've got in front of me. So let's do Jen and then Bill. Jen, go.
Hi. Mine's an article from the Columbus Dispatch on the 22 Ohio counties declared natural disaster areas by the USDA due to the ongoing drought. And it really is bad up here. I've lived here 7 years now, and it's actually the worst conditions that I've seen. But for some areas, it's actually the worst on record. For the first time in Ohio history, Athens County and Meigs County are in the exceptional drought category. So they've never had that on record. And so it is really bad here. And, just when you look ahead to, the next couple of weeks, it's not looking very good at all. And we're just having a hard time getting any raindrops. Even the front we had come through, it brought the cool air, but quick shower. It was not a drought buster at all. In the Columbus area, they're actually in severe drought for Franklin County. But then there are several counties that are under the exceptional drought. So just kind of an overview of what's been happening up in this area. This does extend down into West Virginia as well. So it's primarily that southeastern Ohio, West Virginia areas is really pretty bad right now.
Good deal. All right, Bill Murray, go. Your turn.
Yeah, lots to talk about, James. Wanted to ask Dr. Jacobs, if this continues, Dr. Jacobs, would this make the collapse of the AMOC even more likely, or would it help hold that flipping of the switch off, do you think?
I don't know, because the thing is, the water vapor in the stratosphere is global. So this is going to alter all the patterns globally, and there might be, you might get nonlinear feedbacks in a positive way, and you may get other things that just totally offset this. So, you know, typically in a steady state system, we have patterns and balance, and we can model that stuff. But when you inject something like a, you know, like a massive volcanic eruption or something else, like an asteroid impact, all bets are off. And so I think we're in uncharted territory right now, and no one really knows, you know, what's going to happen. What are the feedbacks that might make it worse or might actually mitigate it or offset it? So to answer your question, I have no idea. And I don't think anybody else does.
Well, that's the thing I fear, is the flipping of that switch in the Atlantic. Luke, we thank you for being here tonight. We'll come and hit you up for a barbecue tour in Kansas City soon, and look forward to that. My pick of the week is this month's WeatherWise magazine that arrived in my mailbox over the weekend. Our friend Sean Potter has a fabulous article in there. You remember how fascinated we were talking about the old Weather Bureau code in the late 1800s and early 1900s, how they were able to send an entire coded weather observation in one word via telegraph? Well, he's got a great article on it in this month's WeatherWise, and it is so worth the read. He will be joining us on October 14th. I just got word, and this is a special message for you, James. So I'm going to change my microphone for a second here to my camera, and you'll recognize this fella. Anybody?
What am I doing? You mean the guy in Alabama? Yeah, that guy. You mean that James Spann guy? Sure, James. I'd love to be on. I watch it frequently. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. James Fan, he's going to join us. Mike Seidel will join us on October 7th. Mitch West. Many of us are big Mitch West fans. One of the young YouTubers who's doing a great job out of South Carolina. He'll join us on the 30th. We're going to preview the Central Indiana Severe Weather Symposium, and little birdie told me Jen may be heading over there for that. I hope she gets to do that. That'd be fun. And next week, Kim and James, Dr. Kim Cloco McLean, and soon to be Dr. James Adelot, will be running the show from the National Weather Association. He's shaking his head. Siri will know that you're shaking your head soon, James A., in this new iPhone 16. But are you shaking your head are you shaking your head, yes or no?
Oh, no, I'll be there. It's maybe never miss this show ever again after being there. It's going to be fun. Nobody's going to want to miss this.
That's not true. You guys are going to run it from the Ron, and we'll have lots of fascinating guests. I'm really, really looking forward to that show. So, James, that's some of our guests out through mid-October here on WeatherBrains.
Excellent. All right. So let's see here. Luke, plug anything you need to plug away. Go. This is your chance.
You got everything you need from me. I mean, a little Facebook, a little Twitter, Instagram. That's about it. If you're in the KC area, I know that you've got people listening all over. Give the weather show a chance and let me know if you like it and what you don't like, and just give us some feedback. We haven't had a lot of feedback on that, but that's all I got for you.
All right, so 6:30 Monday through Friday, right?
That's correct.
Good deal. All right. Well, let's kind of wrap this thing up here. We got a lot of things going on with the tropical system here. If you are new, we are typically on the air Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And for those of you that listen, you can also watch live if you'd like to, or watch later on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/weatherbrains. But we know that most of you listen. And if you want to get in touch with us, our email, it's shaking and baking, rocking and rolling. It works. It works well.
It got us,
again,
Emily.
The, email at weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, Emily. You were great.
Emily.
Thank you.
Great
This has
segment.
been awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to
Thanks,
you soon.
Luke.
Luke, thank you too.
Yeah, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.
thank
Luke,
you guys
Luke,
both.
thank you. Thanks, everybody. Great show.
See ya.
It was an honor. Thank you.